we have a quorum. All right, there we go. I think we have a quorum here. So we'll proceed. Let me go to my calendar. Public comment. We don't have any public comment in person according to Mara. There was a couple of written comments. They have been placed online, and I think Mara, you send those to everybody, correct, Mara?
Yes, I do. I circulate them to the commission and post them online for public view.
All right, so you've seen those. One of them will come in to, we'll talk a little bit more about the habeas, the letter from the habeas lawyers when we get to that item later on this morning. And the other item was from, I think, Olcott Thompson regarding Marion County and the case assignment process that they're having down there, updating us on that. So the first item of business at 9:20, so we're already way ahead, you guys. As the unrepresented person in Oregon shortage, that's Ken and Maddie are going to do a presentation. Go ahead, Ken.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And Mara's pulling up a few slides. So as we had talked about it at some of our other meetings, we're trying to shorten some of these discussions. We included in our commission packet the the monthly report that we send out to folks, a wide variety of folks on, a more detailed discussion of each of our crisis counties. But I'm here to provide a brief overview and answer any questions that folks have, but then also to bring in a little bit of new complexities that Roberts has brought for us. And so, Mara, if you'd go to the first slide, please, that'd be great. So if you reviewed the materials that were sent out to you and looked at the reports, you'd see that there are a couple primary takeaways that we were able to show in January of 2026. I think first, as you can see from the histogram on the right-hand side of this slide, unrepresented numbers overall across the state continue to fall. And we've been able to see now almost a full year's worth of more cases being assigned than being added to our unrepresented list. And that's really what has stemmed the tide, is that we've been able to reverse that pattern that had been happening before, where we consistently saw more cases being added to the list than exiting. Some of that is due to the work that our assignment coordinators have been undergoing. They assigned 620 cases in January, which was actually lower than probably our 6-month average. I think that's more of a seasonal fluctuation than anything else. But they're doing a lot of hard work to make sure cases are being assigned. The courts and others are doing a lot of hard work to make sure that those cases are being assigned as well. With all that good news, one thing is notable, and it's that when we look at our 4 crisis jurisdictions, there is mixed progress there. I'll be talking about Marion County, which is a positive story on our next slide. However, in some of our other jurisdictions, when we look at Multnomah County, Washington County, we've certainly seen a leveling off or maybe some even, temporary upward trends in cases on the unrepresented list as well there. If nothing else, when you average everything together, it had been kind of flattish over January. We also saw some temporary increases around the holidays, like literally right around Christmas and New Year's, of maybe some higher numbers of folks in custody for a temporary period of time in some of our counties. We did also see a temporary increase in Clackamas County, which we've already been able to largely work through over the past few weeks to month. And so we've seen some fluctuations there, but overall, we continue to see a pretty positive downward movement statewide. Next slide, please. And so what my aim is for these reports in the future is to provide an overview like that, and then to go into a couple specifics depending on whether there are some items that really bear a little bit more discussion. So I've got 2 of those for you today. The first of which is talking about Marion County. As of the first week of February, we've seen really significant progress in Marion County. As of yesterday, we had 8 total cases on the unrepresented list. 6 of those were non-pretrial cases because they're habeas cases, which are a little bit different than what we're used to dealing with normally. And as of yesterday, we had 1 out of custody case and 1 in custody case. But I believe that I saw an email come across my desk this morning that we have 0 unrepresented cases as of this morning. And so again, we were able to get those 2 cases handled yesterday. And so that's been a real success story. We've seen so much progress in Marion County. It's been really exciting for us as staff to be able to now focus primarily on 4 crisis counties as opposed to 6, like we were doing just a few months ago. Next slide, please. The other thing I want to flag, however, is especially if you are paying attention to the OJD dashboards, like I do, which is probably a little bit of a stretch, um, is the impact that Roberts is already having on the unrepresented list. So we do have a line item to talk about Roberts later, but just in essence, Roberts mandates the dismissal of cases that run up against a 60 or 90-day threshold, depending on whether they're misdemeanors or felonies. And so some courts across the state have proactively undertaken an effort to begin dismissing cases. Um, the ones that I've heard of that impact us are Jackson County and Douglas County. It is my understanding that other courts have not moved quite as fast as they have to begin dismissing those cases sua sponte. And so what we're seeing in the data, unsurprisingly, and I have a just illustration of Douglas County here, to show you is a pretty significant drop as cases are being dismissed, unsurprisingly. So we can see that there was a reduction from 105 to 109 cases just between the 5th of February when the Roberts decision was released and the 11th of February. And so this just means A, that we need to be a lot more careful as we begin to do our analyses and release um, future data releases of our unrepresented crisis reports, because we know, first of all, while we've been able to take a lot of credit as a community for case reductions over the past several months, in this case, this is an exogenous thing that's happening outside of folks taking cases, right? And so we need to make sure that we're able to articulate any future downward movement, which of that is attributable to public defenders taking cases and clearing cases versus those that are disappearing from the list because of Roberts. We also know that the Roberts cases can be refiled because they're supposed to be dismissed without prejudice. And so it also may just be a temporary blip in the data to where we might see, like we have an illustration here, a downward trend that happens really, really quickly. But especially for misdemeanor cases that can be easily refiled, we might see a jump in the future, perhaps equal to that. And so I just want to let folks know that we may be seeing a lot more data instability as we go forward. It's something that we're hoping to be able to measure. It's my hope that the OJD, for example, will be able to have some sort of flag for Roberts dismissed cases, because then we know that we might be able to tie those to future cases that come back. That's all the data stuff behind the scenes, but it's what we're thinking about internally as we get ready to release our February report in just a couple weeks, because February is such a short month. And so I'd be happy to take any questions that you all have, but those are the slides I have today for unrepresented.
Can I,
Any questions? I
yeah,
can't
I
see
have,
everybody's hand, so just speak up.
sorry about that. All right, so I'm assuming that the numbers in the unrepresented report are coming from OJD, and I'm wondering if you have provider data that kind of goes against it, so that you can see, in addition to, the difference between how many folks are waiting counsel, how many cases have been assigned to public defenders in Oregon at the same time. That would just be an interesting juxtaposition to see if the data that we get from providers kind of matches up with the OJD.
Sure. That's a good question, Commissioner Nab. That is something we're able to do in some of the in like for example, we were able to look at OJD data for civil commitments versus our data, and actually it was really, really helpful because we know that OJD collects civil commitment data differently depending on the county, essentially what counts as a filed case maybe versus a case with a hearing. And in that case, when we were looking at our data, it was very, very close. And so it was very useful to be able to use that. You're right, almost as a ground truther for something that is a little bit has some data questions on their end. The main issue that we have is that the data that we get from our providers right now is lagged. And so around the 20th of each month is when we are processing and trying to upload data from the previous month. And so when we present things like the unrepresented crisis right now, we're already presenting data as of January 31st because we're looking back to that report we just filed. And I think it wouldn't be quite as informative if we were talking about data that would be maybe even lagged further, right? And so it's something that we can do um, later, but at least like for these updates, that's why we generally focus on the OJD data. But we've done a lot of work internally to better connect our data with OJD data. I think there was a long time where there were quite a bit of gaps, but they weren't necessarily. I think it was more of a data quality issue, and getting a greater understanding of how our data looks compared to OJDs. But I'd say the main thing for the unrepresented report is we want to make sure that we're as timely as possible, which on our end, it's a little harder for us to be timely. Oh, you're muted, Chair.
So I have two questions, Ken. One is, what do you attribute the reduction, pretty quick reduction in Marion County to? We have three different providers. We also received a letter from Mr. Alcott today, or recently as well, regarding Marion County. Do you have any insights into what's been working well there?
I think Marion County is a really good example of all of the different system partners coming together. Um, we began to see some downward trends in Marion County, even, before my arrival. And when I looked at some of those initial trends, we did see that we had near the end of our last contract cycle increased FTE at MCAD. We did see a faster case pickup rate at the Public Defender of Marion County, and we also had our trial team finally being fully staffed in the jurisdiction. So I think part of the explanation is we had increased capacity to take cases. What went hand in hand with that increased capacity was a willingness by the court to to readjust back to some older practices of case assignment because the capacity was there to be able to take cases, which I think allowed things to clear through faster. They went back to the attorney of the day approach that they had not been doing for a period of time. We also were able to initiate a new early resolution docket following some negotiations with the prosecutor in the county. And so I think that in Marion County, it's a good example of there was not one single driver. It's providers, it's OPDC trial staff, it's an early resolution docket, it's some court practices. All of those things came together, and I think that's why you also saw more of a quick reduction as opposed to a gradual reduction.
Had Marion County not done an early case resolution docket in the past?
There were some attempts, and I mean, and I think there were some attempts that went back all the way into COVID as well. And so I think that there were fits and starts. I know that there was some frustration in the past, felt by the prosecutor's office that was expressed to me when I went to DA Clarkson to talk about doing a new early resolution docket. Um, but there was not one in place when we initiated this new one. I think that it had gone dormant for a little while. I'm not sure exactly how long.
Do you know if the resistance to it or the frustration with it came from prosecutor bench or defense bar or all of them or
I think
what
a
was
little bit
happening?
everybody. I think that one of the things that we see when it comes to early resolution dockets that can gum up the works a bit is the prosecutors oftentimes think that they are making very, very sweet deals. Defense attorneys do not necessarily see eye to eye with those deals as being much better than what they could um, obtain in just the normal course. And so I think that at times there's some disagreement as to whether there's really that motivation to get the case resolved early. And I think it's that I think it's a little bit nuanced as to exactly what is the truth there. I think it's a little bit more thanks to the adversarial nature of the system that everybody always
Sure.
wants a better outcome.
Yeah.
And so I think that it was some tied to that, but I've heard that type of consternation in many counties to where that's often at play when we're talking about these dockets.
Yeah. Um, on the total number, when we're talking about reported unrepresented people, that is not talking about people on active warrant status. Is that right?
That is correct.
So has that number, active warrant status, gone up significantly as the unrepresented has dropped? Do you see any correlation to those two numbers? Because
That is a good question. I've not looked at that recently enough to be able to tell you definitively, but I'd be happy to follow up with some more on the warrant status, folks. I do know that it's a not insignificant number. And it's also a piece that's playing into some of these discussions as well.
Yeah, I'm just curious because at some point, many of those people will come back into the system. And if we're just shuffling off from one category to another, we may be delaying an inevitable
Right.
another hump. The other thing is the Roberts. I talked to Mr. Barton, District Attorney Barton here in this county about Roberts late last week, I guess, and just to get an idea of what they were going to do. And he indicated he thought about half the Roberts dismissals they wouldn't be able to refile, by the way. But
Wow.
regardless, we are going to see a camel hump tennis ball through the snake situation there too. So yes, it'll drop by whatever, 30%, but 15% of those are going to come back at some point. Just to keep, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there as you analyze these numbers. Those are two things I think to keep in mind.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, they're going to come back and they're going to have Robert's timelines on them, and there's going to be pressure and expectation to get those
Yep.
cases assigned at a faster rate than has happened in the past. The average number of days to assignment, I think, across all cases has been 140 days, and that's clearly problematic in the Roberts, kind of in this Roberts situation we're in now. So yes, completely agree that when that hump comes back, that's something we're going to need to be able to respond to, and I'm happy to talk about some of the ideas we have from a staff perspective when
Okay.
we get to
May
that
I
Robert.
jump in for just a second? Chair Harris, why can't
Sure.
half of those cases in Washington County be refiled? They're dismissed without prejudice, right?
Yeah, loss of witnesses, time is gone, that sort of thing. They're estimating how many they think because a lot of these are lower level offenses, and property offenses when the victim has left or has become frustrated. Yeah. All right, and I know we're going to cover Roberts later on today, so I don't want to get too deep in the woods in that, but I did want to put a pin in the fact that some of these data are going to be affected by Roberts as we go through these, and keep that in mind as we go over the next several months as this works its way through the system. All right, any other questions on the unrepresented crisis, or I probably should call it the unrepresented status quo, unfortunately. All right. Next item is director's update. Ken, you've got a couple, three or four different things to cover here, so I'll just hand it over to you.
Yeah, I have a few brief things just to update the commission on. Mara, if you'd like to jump over to the first slide, that would be great. So first, just as an alert to our upcoming meetings, we do have several that are coming up in the next few weeks. First, we have the commission work group meeting on Thursday, March 5th. The agenda for that meeting is still under development, and so keep an eye out for that coming pretty soon. We also have the governance subcommittee on the 9th. For that committee, right now, the plan would be to discuss updates to our public comments guidelines and on our website as well to ensure that we're conforming with OGEC rules and our new bylaws that we will hopefully have discussed and passed during this meeting. We also have an audit committee on the 9th. This will be the first quarterly meeting of 2026, and the current plan is for the committee to discuss current internal work that's being done by our auditor, a management update on budget, finance and operations, the status of prior OPDC audit recommendations and management reports to DAS, and then also revisions to the 3-year audit plan and the discussion of the audit committee and internal audit charters and the internal auditor position description. And then we have our March commission meeting on the 18th. I actually have a slide at the end, or a couple slides at the end of this presentation that talks about more from an annual perspective, what to expect as we come up to our future meetings. And so I'll leave a discussion of some of those items to that. And so let's move to our next slide, please, Mara. So the other updates that I'll have are listed here briefly on the slide. I'll start off with a very brief update on our FCMS system, the financial and case management system. So we have essentially been in negotiation with our vendor on this project since around mid-November. Our hope is to move into stage gate 4, which means that moving into actual work being done on this project next month. We're currently finalizing, scope of work, the project management plan, all of those items that need to be squared away before we actually begin work. I know that in our last meeting, Chair Harris had some pretty specific questions about FCMS, as far as who it applies to, or what data will be submitted, things like that. My plan is either in March or April, depending on that kickoff date for transitioning to the next stage, to have some more detailed updates from FCMS staff to come before you. Next slide, please, Maura. Now we have a couple slides on a couple other items. The first is we wanted to make all of you aware, and if you looked at the bylaws, you would have seen some slight changes in our the verbiage that we have been using to refer to different aspects of our agency and our commission. So an issue that we've had for many years that's not unique at all to OPDC. In fact, I encountered this a lot back at my old job at CJC, was that there's oftentimes a lot of confusion when folks just refer to quote unquote the commission, because the commission can refer to the agency, it can refer to staff at the agency, it can refer to you all as commissioners in your official capacity, acting as a group. And so, a lot of times we would talk about big C versus little c. What does the commission do versus what does the staff do? And so what we've done internally is we have created a definitions document, a definitions policy to try to lay out some consistent wording that we can use through our standards, through our bylaws, through our different, policies, procedures, all the things we do to make sure that the public especially is informed as to both who is making decisions, and then once decisions are made, what are the appropriate routes to take when engaging with different parts of the commission, big C or little c commission. And so taking the lead from some of the DOJ trainings that we had at the end of last year, what we've done is we've defined our different groups, and we've started off by defining your body as quote unquote the board, the 13-member group that's outlined in statute, as opposed to the commission. And that's mainly so that we can keep the word commission as an all-inclusive term referring to all of us. We did define your role still as commissioner, because I think that's the way that the public knows you all the best, and it conforms with all of our practices and how we refer to you all when we, from a title standpoint, when we discuss things. And then we have agency, and then staff or employees. And so you'll see in our documents going forward that whenever you see a reference to board, that's you guys. Whenever you see a reference to agency, that's us as staff, and then commissioner would be you. And so we just wanted to make sure to provide that as information for you, and to make sure that there was no other feedback that you had, but the bylaws that we drafted would follow this new terminology. Again, just that we're trying to institute for clarity, or install for clarity. And if there's no questions there, next slide, please, Mara. I do have a brief budget update as well. We have our budget broken down by our different divisions here. A couple things that I want to just to provide as note as you're looking over this vast spreadsheet that's on the slide. First is you'll notice that there is a column that's right there in the middle for unscheduled appropriation. So that was where, if you recall, there had been a budget note in our budget that was passed this last biennium that unscheduled 21 or almost $22 million across our different provider buckets of funding. And having that scheduled was premised on us reporting to the legislature during short session. So we did that report. That report has been accepted by the Public Safety Subcommittee. Recommendation has been passed on from that subcommittee that our funding be appropriately scheduled. So in the past, that was shown as basically funding on hold, which would have impacted our unused appropriation column on the end pretty significantly across our adult trial division, which is our adult criminal contract funding, juvenile trial division, PCRP, and our trial division as well. And so that would have been equal to about 5% of each of those buckets would have been shown as essentially a negative in those cases. So that's been removed. I anticipate that there will be no problems with getting that scheduled given the direction that the legislature has provided. Of course, we have to make sure that legislative session goes all the way through and all of those things pass. But at least right now, we're tentatively thinking of that as being scheduled because we have gone through the process that was required there. You'll also see that we do have an overall deficit. In that case, much of that deficit is due to gaps related to salaries. And it's a standard practice across the state for what's known as SAL pot or salary pot to be provided that oftentimes covers that gap between what an agency may have been budgeted at, and then what an agency actually has to pay its employees following union negotiations and everything that comes after the budget is actually established. And so that will cover much of the gap. And so you'll be seeing over time these at least projected shortfalls at the moment to essentially work themselves out. So I would encourage you to see that as we go forward in our future months. A couple other just things of note. The final law school payments were all made on the 1st of January for our law school funding, our programs. All of those contracts are signed. And I do want to note that when we did our budget build for this biennium, we had to forecast how long we thought THIP cases would continue to need funding, and then try to calculate an amount of funding based on that time period to cover THIP cases. As you'll see for our two red labeled THIP divisions there, we are essentially to the point where we have exhausted our THIP funding. We still have around 400 THIP cases that we're being paid on, and so those are right now being pointed to uh, our regular hourly bucket and court mandated expenses. That's something that we may need to work with LFO on from a formal stance to make sure that we point to the right buckets or to move money around to cover those THIP cases. We are tracking all THIP expenditures, and so we should be able to go back and to true that up once we have discussions with LFO on their preferred way to make sure that we're appropriately looking at the right bucket. But that is something that I wanted to flag for folks just for your information. If there aren't questions, then I'll move on to the next slide, Maura. So one thing that we're going to be talking about for our next meeting is the budget development for 27-29. It's already here and in full swing. And what we would like to solicit from you all as commissioners at the next meeting, perhaps also at the next work group meeting, are ideas or proposals that you all may have for what are called policy option packages or for legislative concepts. For folks who are new to the state government game, the normal way the budget process works, and I'll say normal because we are in slightly abnormal times, but the normal way the budget process works is that there is a presumed amount of growth for each agency's budget. There's a standard inflation rate that is normally applied to your different budget categories that would then help you to figure out what your next budget is for 27-29. Anything that you want to do to change your budget, whether that is shifting money from one division to another or creating new programs, those are all called policy option packages because they have a cost. And we have to take those policy option packages both through the governor's budget process and then through the legislative process and hope that they get funded. So in a normal cycle, what we would see is agencies would gather together their best ideas. As an executive branch agency, we would submit those to the governor's office, and that will be coming up relatively quickly. And then the governor's office goes through a process with agencies to refine POP requests. And the culmination of that process happens when the governor's budget is released in December. So, for example, if we had a new idea for like an internship program or something like that that we wanted to build, then we would propose that to the governor's office. The governor's office would vet that idea. And then if the governor's office includes that in the governor's budget, then we are allowed to pursue that legislatively. If a POP does not make it through the governor's budget process, then we are not allowed to pursue that legislatively because it's not part of the governor's budget. That's the normal cycle, or the normal approach. What I do want to pass on is that I would love to hear the ideas that everybody has, but because of the budget situation that we are in, I do want to flag that there are worries about what the next funding cycle is going to look like. Right now, the legislature is working to balance the budget in the 2026 session as it's required to by law. But then we are worried about the possibility of reductions both in this budget cycle in 2026, but then also looking at 27-29. And so the guidance that we have been given by the governor's office in crafting our budget is that any policy option package that we propose as an agency must be budget neutral, which means that any new funding for anything at all must be offset by a reduction in funding in our budget somewhere else. And the instructions we've basically been given is that while we can submit some aspirational ideas, the likelihood of those being approved, I would say, are less than minuscule. Um, in the same way that policy option packages need to be budget neutral, any legislative concept would also need to be budget neutral. I would assume if it's a legislative concept that would result in savings, then that would be welcomed. But if it was a legislative concept that results in additional costs, again, we would have to identify within the agency budget itself a commensurate reduction somewhere else. And so I don't mean for that to be discouraging, but I do want to just make sure that this is communicated really clearly, both to you all as commissioners, but then out to the community as well, that it looks like, at least right now, it's going to be somewhat slim pickings as we move forward into the next biennium. And so we will send out some more guidance or thoughts on how to develop ideas, or again, if you want to throw out ideas once we have that on the agenda next month, then that would be an opportunity to do so, and we can try to game plan or think about how we could maybe do some things with very little budget flexibility. So I know that was a lot of information, at least on budget development, very quickly. I'm not sure if folks have any questions there. I'll pause just for a moment.
Any questions? Jump right in. I can't see everybody's hands.
Yeah, it's a little hard to see
Yeah.
more than two people.
Ken, if someone does have an idea that's budget neutral, that is potential policy or a pop,
Yep.
should they just email that to you before the next meeting so you have a chance to take a look at it?
I think that would be useful. I mean, certainly it would be nice to have the commission discuss any ideas we have, but if you have an idea, whether budget neutral or not, let me know early, because if it's not budget neutral, we can see what the cost would be and maybe we could try to think through some creative solutions. Certainly, if it is budget neutral, then pass it on, and that might be an easier thing to propose. But yes, I think that's a great idea, Chair. I encourage folks to reach out to me.
All right, thanks.
Okay, next slide, please. So I wanted to flag as well that the accounts payable dashboard that we talked about in December has been posted online. We have also tried to rework our webpage ever so slightly to make access to data and our data dashboards and reports easier. And so we added, as you can see in the illustration here, a new link that is on our homepage right across the top ribbon that links to data and publications. If you click on the data reporting and dashboards, then you'll see our dashboards for trial division and our contracts database, or contracts dashboard, excuse me, but then also that AP dashboard as well, that shows the current number of days that we're taking for turnaround times on those, and it shows the intake rate and everything for our AP program. Also, we've heard from commissioners that at times it's really difficult to find the appropriate link for Workday. I know you all love going into Workday probably as much as the rest of us do, but it's even more frustrating when you can't find the right link for it. And so we've added that to the bottom of our homepage as well, so that you should be able to navigate to Workday quickly. A full overhaul of our website is something that we don't really have the bandwidth for at the moment, but certainly as I'm seeing or others are seeing things that are small fixes that we could do to make access to information easier, that's something that I'm excited about trying to push through, even though we don't have a lot of bandwidth for it. So if there are any other items that you all as commissioners have as flags for me, please pass them on, and we can think about whether it's adding links like we've done or moving things around a little bit. We'd be more than happy to see if that's feasible under our current structure.
And Ken, can you explain briefly what Workday is for and what it's utilized for? We have new counselors, and frankly, I haven't been able to get into it for a long time, and I'm confused by it as well. So could you give us a short primer on that?
Certainly, certainly. So Workday is essentially the HR management system that the state of Oregon uses. For those of us who are employees, that's where you put in, you would report your time or ask for time off. You'd see your pay stubs and items like that. But it is also the central hub for all online trainings at the state, and that is the place where you as commissioners will most often interact with Workday. We do have two required annual trainings that are always required to be done before December of each, or before the end of December of each year. And I would say that's the most frequent reason why folks go on Workday once they become commissioners. You would have some interaction with Workday before you become a commissioner as you put in an application, and then are assigned essentially a position, a volunteer position at the agency. But training is the most common thing that you'll interact with Workday for. The issue that we normally run into is that Workday requires multi-factor authentication, and you have to remember your password. And so some of those things that are simple when you access Workday a lot are a lot harder when you do it once a year, maybe twice a year. So I would encourage you, if you're having any trouble with your Workday logins, reach out to Mara first. She may not be able to be the right, technical support person for you, but she can connect you with our folks internally if you need help with Workday.
And does Workday have anything to do with with requesting a per diem or expense reimbursements, Ken?
Expense reimbursements, I would work with Mara on those. I think if you are able to get a per diem, or there are there's now within state law that if you make under a certain amount of money, you can actually be paid a small stipend for your time on the commission. I think that eventually shows up in Workday, but I don't think that you initiate that through Workday. I think that's something that we do through a slightly separate process
Okay.
and feeds into that on the back end.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next slide, please, Mara. So here is a couple slides that we've put together to try to show you all what to expect over the next year as far as commission meeting workload and duties. It's broken down. Each slide is essentially one quarter. Certainly, as we get farther out into future quarters, things are a little bit more amorphous. And so we may move things around, but we also wanted to give you all a basic roadmap of what to expect moving forward. So looking ahead first to our March meeting, we do have a number of items that we'll be bringing forward to you, some of which are more agency type items as opposed to, big system-wide discussions. And so those first, they include policy option packages, legislative policy proposals, like I mentioned earlier. We do need to have approval of what is known as our continuity of operations plan. That is essentially the plan that describes what the agency would do in the event of a disaster. And whether that disaster be a natural disaster or even, active shooter, things like that. It's our plan that would show how the agency would respond, both centrally, but then at our satellite offices to any of these issues that arise. And so we'll have a brief presentation about our, usually we call it the COOP plan, the continuity of operations plan, upcoming in March. We will also have some updates around agency policy making that's going on and agency rulemaking. We'll be talking about our annual rulemaking calendar going forward as we actually move into passing administrative rules for the first time as a commission. Next slide, please. Then looking ahead to quarter two, we will be needing to finalize policy option packages and legislative concepts early in quarter number two. And so that's why we'll begin that work in earnest this coming month. Again, we'll have rulemaking and policy work that's coming before the commission sometime in quarter two. Within that 3-month period, we're aiming to bring forward standards on extraordinary case credits and guardianship. We also have our KPMs that we need to finalize. That's something we've been talking about over the past couple meetings, but we've taken a little hiatus for the last meeting or so. Those are due in April. If needed, if we have to go to the June emergency board, that's something that the agency will bring forward to you all as commissioners. For new folks, the emergency board is what exists to perhaps fill budget gaps or to make other budget changes during the interim period between short session and the next long session, though I would expect that much like we've been talking about with budget challenges, that e-board would be something that would be a very difficult thing to go to if we needed something in addition to our core budget. But certainly if we have technical adjustments, we may bring those before you if we need things through the June emergency board. And then also if we need to have any changes to different policies around our pre-authorized expenses, our hourly program, which is the CME bucket, or our accounts payable policies, we'll be reserving some time there if we need to bring those. Next slide, please, for quarter three. We then have near the end of the summer one of our standard legislative reports, and so it's our interim status report that we'll have to follow. We'll bring that before you. We will also be talking about the agency request budget. So a little bit more detail on the budget process. Like I mentioned, we're working on right now POPs and legislative concepts, and then our base budget. That information begins to feed into our CFO system on the executive branch side after April. CFO does some initial analysis of that budget and then gives us some feedback, and that's what we use to create our agency request budget. That's the official kind of final budget that we submit to the governor as she tries to build her governor's budget. And so the agency request budget is what is mentioned in statute that the commission approves and then essentially submits through the staff to DAS. That's a bit of a change statutorily compared to the budget process that we had previously. So I just wanted to flag that for you. There's also another emergency board opportunity in September. So I've already described at least basically what that is. And then more policies, rulemaking, and a review of our key performance measures report, which would be the actual measurement of those measures in September. And then finally, last slide, Q4, we will have yet another report that will be due at the end of the year, our third comprehensive report that will be due in December of 2026. We'll review that. There is a last opportunity for a December emergency board before the next long session in the following January. And then again, policies and rulemaking will be in that quarter as well. And then we will also want to begin some discussions about what provider contracts might look like as we move into the new year and into the long session. So that's at least a high-level overview of what we hope to bring you all. I know that's a lot of information, but that's also why I wanted to make sure it was on slides for you all to take and digest later. If there are any initial questions, happy to take those. If not, feel free to email me if you have questions on any specifics.
Great. That calendar actually by quarter was very helpful to me to see the whole calendar year out there by major initiatives or timelines. That's really helpful, Kim. Thanks.
Great. And we'll keep updating that as well. And so if it's something, if we see major changes, we'll certainly let you all know.
Great. Any questions, comments, clarifications? All right. Leslie or Commissioner
Yeah,
Kay,
is
go ahead.
that commission schedule available somewhere on the website, or can you send it out? It's really helpful to see the overview of the year.
All of the presentations that we do as staff are added to the commission materials as soon as we're finished with the commission meeting. So when you actually navigate on our page to the materials section under the commission drop down, everything is in that giant packet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. All right. Next item on the agenda is State v. Roberts update discussion. For those of you who for some reason are not aware of State v. Roberts, it was litigation that's been working its way through the court, finally got to the Oregon Supreme Court regarding the constitutionality of not providing attorneys to individuals charged with crimes. And the essence of the ruling was that the Supreme Court found that it's a violation of the Constitution, and that the remedy is if it's a misdemeanor, if someone does not have a lawyer appointed to them within 60 days, the case shall be dismissed without prejudice, and for felonies, 90 days. And that had a lot of that'll have a lot of consequences down the road, as you know. Right now, actually, 2 counties have already done general order of dismissals for many of the cases that they have found to be in violation of the State v. Roberts guideline. And there's more to come. I know in our county, I think the presiding judge has decided, because there is it's not a loophole, it's sort of a conditional finding. It's a finding that unless the DA has some good objection or some substantial reasonable objection to go beyond the 60 or 90 days. So our presiding judges, I believe, is going to give a list of cases to the DA and give them like 10 days an opportunity to object to the dismissal. So there's different courts are doing different things is the bottom line. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying there's different courts doing different things. And like I said earlier, our DA, after having some discussions with him, he's doing 2 things. He's already told me that he thinks about half the cases they will not be able to file new charges on. They're debating whether or not they're going to go out and arrest people or just cite them to appear. I pointed out that it's not these people's fault that they did not get lawyers, and I don't understand why they should have to go through that process, and it's not good for the jail or the release offices or anyone else. Um, so to be determined on that. Um, and again, it's going to show a large drop off, but then a pickup again. Ken and I talked, and Susan also, I think, on this right after it came down about how the agency could respond. And so I know Ken has been developing some ideas in Washington County, and I think otherwise they're starting to look at early rapid resolution dockets. I sort of call them the Roberts rapid resolution calendars. Um, and I know that's been talked about or looked at. I don't know that anyone's done anything in this state. So that's sort of laying the foundation of the groundwork or the background for this. And I'll just hand it off to Ken to see if he has any either updates or thoughts or what's going on the agency side on how to address the Roberts rulings.
Thank you, Chair. And what I'll mention too, just to make sure folks are we're all on the same page. So, um, it was mentioned. Well, sorry. Trying to think of where to start. So far, the questions that we've been getting and the questions that we've been trying to solve are some of the ones that the chair just mentioned. It's, what is the size and scope of the Roberts ruling and how does it apply to the unrepresented numbers? And then what will the future look like once some of these cases begin to be dismissed? So if you read the newspapers right after Roberts was released, there were some quotes of around 1,465 cases as of that date, and so that would have been as of the 5th of February that have already passed Roberts thresholds. Those cases are found in 10 counties, but they're primarily focused in the crisis counties because that's where the large unrepresented lists are. So, for example, Benton County and Josephine County were on that initial list of counties having cases that were past Roberts deadlines, but there were only 1 and 2 cases in those counties, respectively. So they're relatively small in number and I think manageable. Across our crisis counties, however, the numbers are much higher. Multnomah County is by far the highest. It accounts for around 62.5% of the entire of all the cases across the state that were subject to Robert on the 5th. Um, Washington County was around 18%. So between Washington and Multnomah County, we're talking about 80% of all of the Roberts affected cases there. Douglas and Jackson were the next 2 highest counties, but they only had around a little bit over 5% and a little bit over 12%, respectively, of those cases. We also know that there are some differences across those counties as far as the breakdown of felonies versus misdemeanors. Um, and so in Multnomah County, for example, misdemeanors make up about 2/3 of all of the Roberts. Make sure I said it right. Felonies make up around 2/3 of all the Roberts cases in Multnomah County, around 70% of all the Roberts cases in Washington County. That pattern is the reverse in Douglas and Jackson, where they are majority misdemeanors in both of those jurisdictions. And so as staff, is there a question real quick? Okay. As staff, what we have been trying to do is formulate a response, especially given the fact that Multnomah County is so overrepresented in that area. And so some work that we had already been doing with the courts and the DA to set up an early resolution docket there that would be much larger than any early resolution docket that we have set up before. Those discussions that had been initiated right before Roberts, we've really seen that as a potential solution to the Roberts issue, at least at the felony level, because this was an early resolution docket that was going to focus primarily on property crimes, C felonies that could be reduced or have offers of being reduced down. Possibly to misdemeanors or for relative or for outcomes that are a little bit more attractive than folks would get going to trial. And so what we have as staff been putting together is a plan that would include both increases in those crisis jurisdictions to our local providers, should our local providers be willing and able to make increases to their contracts. But then also we already have an ask before the legislature that we initiated months ago to add some trial team members to our trial team up in Multnomah County. We have slightly amended that ask as we've been in discussions with the Legislative Fiscal Office. Originally, we wanted those new folks to start in July, but we've asked to move up our position authority to be able to hire folks earlier so that we could actually get them hopefully in the door and staffing this early resolution docket, especially in Multnomah County. In Multnomah County, the plan is to handle 100 to 150 felonies per month through the docket. Right now, we could, at OPDC, through our trial team, support about 20% of that. And so that's why we need to shift those resources there to be able to make that docket work. Part of the detail of that docket is that any case that does not resolve early, we would be agreeing to retain within OPDC. And so, again, that's why we're focused on making sure that we have the capacity there to take those felonies. We would ideally be looking for an increased provider capacity to look at the misdemeanors because they are not slated currently to be included in the early resolution docket. When we look at Washington County, we are primarily focused on trying to see if there is additional capacity that could be brought on through our contractors there because we don't have a physical presence in Washington County. So even if we use trial team for Washington County cases, they're constantly driving from the Multnomah County Courthouse, which reduces their efficiency. And then in our southern area, we're hoping to deploy at least one of our new folks down to Southern Oregon, and we have already arrived at an agreement with one of our providers down there to bring in a small cohort of 4 folks closer to the fall. And so we're trying to right size our work there. We're working to finalize a written version of this plan, which I'll be happy to circulate to you all once I finally get the footnotes all squared away today. And I do want to let folks know that there has been, I've been calling it an emergency hearing. It's more just that it's been on very short notice, but a hearing before the Public Safety Subcommittee is scheduled for tomorrow morning starting at 8 a.m. To discuss the Roberts response from OPDC, OJD, and from ODAA. And so there will be a collective presentation tomorrow or a series of presentations tomorrow morning starting at 8, where we'll be talking about this plan that I've mentioned here. And so I just wanted to provide at least some basics on what the agency is thinking, some basic data. If you have other questions about data, I may not have the answer, but I'm happy to work with what I have to give you any insights that are out there. But the main takeaways is what I provided at the beginning. So I'm happy to turn the floor over to you, Chair, and the rest of the commission.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or suggestions from anyone? Guess we're not going to solve the Roberts problem today then. All right. Well, we're doing great. We're ahead of time. Our next item is break. I'm looking at the next. It doesn't look like, looks like the next items are going to take a little bit of time here. So I propose we go ahead and take the break a little early today. Let's make it 10 minutes. It is, well, where's the clock? 9:58. So we'll come back into session about 8 minutes after 10 o'clock. See you then. Welcome back. Haley, are you there? Your video's not on. I'm just not sure whether you're back to your
Yeah,
screen.
I'm here. Yep,
Okay.
I'm here. I'm just
All
walking
right.
in the door, so I'll be
Yeah.
back on.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to wait for you to be able to listen. All right. Oh, excuse me. So we're done with a lot of our updates here and discussion. We're going to go to some possible action items and action items. The first one are the two performance standards. We've seen these a few times. We've done work sessions with them. I know Mr. Arndt is here to present on those. Let's take them one at a time. First, the habeas performance standards, because we did get some feedback from some lawyers who have some concerns about that, Steve. But I do want you to get through your presentation, and then we'll take the discussion from there. So, Mr. Arndt, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair Harris, Vice Chair Mandelberg. Good morning. So, what I wanted to do first was because we've got so many new people here, and I realized I was remiss in kind of updating folks on how we do this and we come to how we come to these. I prepared two slides to go over with everyone that I thought might be helpful to just kind of illuminate how we do this. And forgive me, I am on a loaner computer this morning, so finding things has been a little bit challenging. And I believe everyone can see this. Let me know if you can see this or not see it. All right, I have thumbs up. I'm going to take that as an enthusiastic yes, Steve. I can see what you're presenting. So let's talk about the standards process. How do we get from, hey, we need to have a standard to we're going to have a standard? And there's a number of areas where we've already passed standards, criminal defense, juvenile delinquency, juvenile dependency, PSRB, civil commitment. Those have already been passed, and they all kind of follow the same general process. You know, in 2024, there was a request from the agency for volunteers. We requested that that practitioners who were interested in serving on one of these drafting committees submit to the agency kind of why they thought they should be the person that was working on the new standards. Very generously, people volunteered their time. We screened, we vetted, we offered positions in the drafting committees. Then the drafting committees began drafting. And I think that was November 2024. The meetings of each of these drafting groups was placed on the website. For example, we call this a kind of a quasi-criminal, the two standards we're looking at today. Those groups met about 30 times, and each of those meetings is published on the agency website. And if you're really looking for something to watch in your free time, You can go and watch those meetings. I put the link in the text chat just so people could see if they're ever interested in, hey, where do they keep these? You can see where we keep those. So once the standards are drafted, those are posted to the commission. They're also posted to the agency website so that anybody who wants to can submit a comment on those. Once we receive comments, whether they're comments from the commission or whether they're comments from the public, those are taken up and addressed by the drafting group. For example, I know on the Habeas standards, there's been a lot of back and forth on what are the appropriate standards, should there be standards, what should those look like, and those have been reviewed by the drafting group. There are some things, for example, I know in the Habeas group there was concerns about some things. There were some things from those concerns that were expressed were changed. For example, the language regarding that originally had said trial now talks about evidentiary hearings. There are some other changes that were made in there. Once those standards are reviewed and gone through, they go to a work group. We had a work group on these standards. After the work group, they come here today for all of you to vote on. Once a standard is approved, that's not the end of the line for the standard, though. There's some things that you probably should know. At 1 year, 2 years, and 5 years, we do a review of the standard to say, is this still meeting our expectations? Is it not meeting our expectations? And there may be a time when those are reviewed early or out of sequence. For example, if there's a change in law, rule, or regulation that might trigger earlier review. Commissioner K reached out to me the other day and said, are you aware that there may be a change in a rule regarding clients with diminished capacity? I know the drafters had considered that. The rule has not yet been adopted by the OSB, but that's something that we're aware of. So as we come to things that we're aware of that may change the way a standard is applied, the standards are then reviewed out of cycle. So in looking at today, we have the Habeas standards. I know there have been some comments on those. We took the comments that came in to the drafting committee. The drafting committee reviewed those. In your packet, you have the drafting committee's final draft for your review and approval. Chair Harris, I believe you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay.
So looking at the performance standards that are attached in our packet today, these are the final standards. Did your drafting, we received a letter, as you know.
Mhm.
I think the original one may have been about 10 days ago. And did your drafting committee have a chance to review some of those late arriving comments?
Yes, even when a comment arrives late, we do our best to ensure that the drafting committee gets to it, because it's more important that we get this right than that we, quote unquote, get it done. We want to make sure that if even though we have a deadline, to the extent possible, we want to give deference to whoever the person is who was thoughtful enough to put these together and send them to us. And even though these came in a little bit after the deadline, we made sure that we went back to the drafting committee and said, what do you think of these? There were some things that they disagreed with. They didn't think were appropriate to put into the new standards. And there were other things, for example, the language around, the one that keeps coming to my head is the language around trial versus evidentiary hearing. That language I know was adopted. And unfortunately, I cannot pull up those standards today because I am on a loaner computer and it will not connect to the drive.
So how how many times has these habeas performance standards been before either a work session that we have had or the commission as a whole? I was trying to remember. It seems like the first time was maybe back in November, but do you recall?
This, I believe, is either the fourth or the third time it's gone to the commission. The standards working group has had, I think it was a dozen meetings specifically just on habeas. Now, the habeas and some of the other what we call quasi-criminal type standards were in larger groups, more times than that. Each of those is published on the website. They're out there for review.
All right. And the habeas standards that are presented to us are, I'm looking at it, there's some highlighted, yellow highlights. Are these the sections that have been modified since the last time they were to the commission?
These are the sections that have been modified as we've gone through the process. So
Okay.
it is the original language. Every time it's updated, we have highlighted just so folks can see everything that's changed over the course.
Okay, and I do see where evidentiary hearings is highlighted, so I'm assuming that used to say trial, probably.
Right, exactly.
And that was in response to the late arriving comments.
Yes, it was.
All right. There's not a lot that we have not already seen, it looks like. Um, does any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Arndt? It doesn't look like it. So
I guess I have one.
yeah. Go ahead, Commissioner Knapp.
And this was based mostly on the letter that was received. But and just because I kind of disagreed with the very first comment that the commentary of standard 1.13 was the change if a client lacks capacity to assist in their own litigation, or if a lawyer reasonably suspects that they lack capacity, the lawyer should follow standard 2.3. Was that in response to the letter received, or was that a change that was made prior that I just didn't pick up on?
I believe it was in response to the letter because that was not in our early drafts. It was changed fairly late in the process. I think it is in response to the letter.
Well, so I appreciate that. I just do want to affirm that I absolutely think that 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 articulating that the lawyer should not substitute judgment in these cases is an important part of the standard. So I appreciate that y'all kept it and articulated it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the final version of the standards for habeas corpus representation.
So moved.
That's Commissioner Knapp. Is there a second?
Second.
By Commissioner Leninger. All in favor of any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and we will do just a vote by hand. Raise your hand if you're in favor of the motion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any opposed? That is unanimous. The motion is passed. These are adopted.
I believe that
All
takes us to PCR standards. And we did not get any later comments on the PCR standards. And just like the other standards, the changes that we have made, I believe there were some changes that came from the working group. Those are highlighted so that it draws attention to the fact that these are amended language.
Yeah, I see the one about substituting counsel's judgment. I think that was discussed. That's on page 3 of the standards, page 91 of the package. All right. Any questions of Mr. Arndt or discussion on this one? And Mr. Arndt, real quickly, I assume you went through the same process as far as getting the work group together and having numerous meetings and taking all comment and posting it all on the website?
It's the same standard we do with it's the same process with every
Okay.
standard. Yes.
Well, you know what? One question I did have, how do you put out the initial notice that you're putting together a work group? Where does that notice go to? Does it go to all contractors? Does it go just to the website, your best
It,
friends? What do you do?
it's it's done through the weekly newsletter. So that it goes out in the newsletter. We're looking for people to work on the standards. I believe this one also went through the email list. So the agency has a, a database, an email list of everybody that we've worked with, or people that sometimes even people that we haven't worked with. There may be practitioners who express an interest that are not working in public defense, but they want to be on our email list. It goes out to them as well.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do that because when I was in really busy private practice, I was more likely to read an email about a specific item than a newsletter.
One thing that I've learned in I think I'm on 8 months now, is that sometimes the newsletter is not the best way to reach people.
Yeah.
For the reason you stated.
Yeah.
People just get
Okay.
busy.
All right. With that, any other follow-up questions or any questions of Mr. Art for the PCR standards? Commissioner Kay.
Yes, thank you, Steve, for giving that overview of the process. I think that was helpful in knowing that these will be revisited at the 1 year and 2 year and 5 year mark, because obviously the law does change. And as you mentioned, this ethics rule, the 1.14 ethics rule, is going to be changing probably in the next few months here in Oregon.
Right. And the way that would look, just so you're kind of aware of how would a muscle movement like that work for us, we would go back and look at the standards as a whole, because they're drafted with kind of a general philosophy in certain areas. We try and keep them, to the extent possible, consistent. We would go back and look at, okay, how is this standard going to affect each of these? We would bring them probably all at one time for revision based on the ethics rule change.
Thank you.
We try to be respectful of the commission's time.
And the fact that these are newly adopted, then we would have the automatic 1 year review for these, right, Steve? So
yes, we would.
If anybody's listening or anybody submitted comments, now would be the time to contact you to volunteer their time to be on the work group for the review. Is that true?
We love volunteers.
All right.
There's a lot of people who are incredibly generous that I do not thank enough, that work on things like these standards, the attorney qualification standards.
Okay. Great. With that, I would entertain a motion for approval of the post-conviction relief attorney performance standards.
I'll move.
Commissioner Engelson has moved. Second.
Second.
Commissioner Mandenberg seconds. All in favor, raise your hands. Opposed? It's unanimous. They are adopted. Next item is also an action item. This is the board bylaws. Susan Mandenberg is the chair of the governance subcommittee, and I will hand it over to Susan. She's been working super, super hard on this project for some time, and I think we're ready to congratulate her. Susan?
Well, not me. The committee has been working really hard on it. And the committee has changed a little bit over the almost year, I think, that we've been working on this. And I would also like to thank Mara, who's put in an incredible amount of time, not only trying to keep track of what the committee's been doing, but making some extremely insightful and valuable suggestions that have been very helpful. So I did circulate a memo, and I don't have anything much to add to the memo. Ken has already talked about the changes in definitions. The committee worked with Ken and agency staff on putting those together, and the new bylaws adopt those changes. It's been very frustrating over the 2 years that I've been on the commission to not have some clear definitions that explain who we all are and how we work together, given that we're all called OPDC. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have about our process or why we made the changes we did, or anything else that people want to talk about. I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, great. Hold on a second here. I'm having a little trouble. Yeah, I want to thank also Commissioners Nab and Olson for also volunteering for this governance subcommittee. I know I was on it until this January, and it's can be a lot of work, it can be a lot of thought. You have to dig in there. And I think we had former Commissioner Lipscomb, Judge Lipscomb on there as well. He would sometimes get frustrated because it is minutia. And, having been on city council and spending hours going over our council rules, sometimes you wonder, is it worth it? And then you realize it's worth it if you ever have an issue where you have to go back and see, how do we actually do this? Or how should we resolve this issue? So, and particularly with the changing rules in public meetings laws, public records, to be consistent with that. So I really do appreciate the time y'all put in there. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the governance committee when we get to that. Right now, I just want to see if people have questions about these bylaws. They get reviewed every year, by the way. There will be a review. But I think most of the heavy lifting has been done at this point on this, thanks to this governance subcommittee. So if people have questions or comments or recommendations to either changing, amending these, I would take those now and we could have a discussion. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the commission bylaws as submitted.
So moved.
Commissioner Nab, is there a second?
I'll second.
Was that Commissioner Kay or
That is me, Stephanie.
Elizabeth? Hi. Okay, thank you. That's a second. All in favor, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. That's good. Any opposed? They are adopted. Thank you for the committee doing that work. Again, I know that was really hard work, and I'm sure glad you're glad, I'm sure, that it is done.
Yes.
For now, till next year. The next is just the subcommittee boards. It's been a lot of work being on this commission, particularly over the last few years, because, for obvious reasons. We now seem to be because a lot of the hard work done 1, 2, 3 years ago, I think we're headed in a good direction. And based on a lot of that good work, we're able to build on that. I've been trying to get these meetings down to a reasonable amount of time that we can actually do the work of policy and direction rather than some of the minutiae details. With what we've done here today, we're largely completed with a lot of these details. We're still going to be standards. We're still going to do annual review of the bylaws. A lot of that hard work done by former commissioners and yourself, I think we're reaching the point where that's laid a very good foundation moving forward, which means I would like to be able to continue to make your time as valuable as possible during these meetings. I don't want to have you book out 8:30 to 2:30 days plus prep work plus follow-up. I want to make it as valuable as possible. So with that, I got 2 things. Number one, if you have questions before meetings, feel free to email me. I will have to respect and be aware of public meeting laws, but that shouldn't be a major problem. I will make sure we don't daisy chain stuff. And secondly, you can also contact Ken, our executive director, I you can go through me or you can ask me and I will forward to Ken if that makes you feel more comfortable. Please don't contact any employees directly unless you get approval from the executive director. That's the way it works. That's just to make sure that we have a proper order of things. But in exchange for all that time that you're getting back, we've got a couple of, I want to have a discussion about subcommittees. There's actually I would say three potential positions. There's the governance subcommittee. Susan is Commissioner Mandelberg is the chair. They've been meeting weekly or monthly for what, about hour and a half, 2 hours at a time, I think. But that was because they were working on the bylaws. And so I anticipate that subcommittee to maybe pick up one or two other small projects that Commissioner Mandelberg and Director Sandgren and I have talked about having to do with public comment policies. But it will also be obligated to look at the bylaws every year, annually, at a meeting for probably a few hours as you go through stuff and make sure it's concurrent with any changes in state law or public meetings rules. So that's not going to be a huge time commitment, but if you're able to potentially offer some time and expertise to that, please contact Commissioner Mandelberg. We already have 3 people, and that may be enough, but if you are interested, certainly have the discussion. The second position is actually on the audit committee. It's not a subcommittee, but the audit committee is made up of mainly professional auditors and a provider and one commissioner. And I was the commissioner on that since I was appointed. It meets quarterly. And largely you listen because you're not an auditor. Unless you're an auditor, I mean, but you're probably not because they have professional auditors on there that talk about the process. It's mandated by statute. Most agencies have some sort of an audit function, internal, external. You end up learning more about audits than you probably ever wanted to know. But it is important as a liaison, I think, to have a commissioner there, if nothing else, just to listen and understand what's going on. And so that is quarterly. It usually is about a 3-hour meeting. You do get some materials, but again, you're not a professional auditor, so it does take a little bit of time to read that stuff. It's probably more time in the first couple of meetings to sort of get up to speed as to where they're doing. But it is an important position, and I think that could be either a voting or non-voting member. So if anyone has some time or inclination or loves numbers and finance, was a CPA in their former life, please contact me and I will pass it on to Ken, or we can have a discussion. Or if you want to call me offline here, just give me a phone call and ask me what it's all about. I'll be happy to fill you in more, but please consider having some of your time. So those are two committees. The governance committees probably has enough people, but please let Commissioner Mandelberg know if you are interested. We do need someone for the audit committee. It was vacant apparently for a long time before I came on and volunteered to be on it. So it would be nice to have someone on there. The third is we had historically, when we reformed, back in the day, a year or two ago, we called it the legislative subcommittee. And at that point, we were not under the executive, we were still under judicial. So we did this where we could review legislation. We had somebody on the commission. She was really super good with legislation. She knew people. She sort of knew how things worked in Salem. And so she was able to really help us understand some of the pending and proposed legislation and where it was headed. That was very helpful. Being under the governor's executive branch at this point, it probably means we're not going to be as active promoting any particular policies because it's the governor's policies. But we can review other people's proposals, we're thinking, and for the impact they would have. So we could lend our expertise. If someone were to propose something, we could say, well, we've evaluated this, and this is how this could potentially impact our charge, our mission. And we may not call it the legislative committee. It may be something else, the legislative impact or policy review committee or something like that. And so we're considering putting that back together. And I guess I'd be interested to know what people think, if anyone would be interested, or should we formalize that as a committee? Commissioner Leininger, sorry.
Oh, any version is fine. So the legislative committee I thought was quite effective. You're right that Commissioner Smith was an amazing chair, but also um, Lisa Taylor was really savvy, and a lot of time we depended on her expertise. I recall that the work done by that committee in 2024, which is sort of comparable to this year, was pretty important, and it included not only going over proposals, but also vetting communication with subcommittees. And sometimes it really got down to fine points in that communication. And, still with Ms. Taylor's expertise, I think there's, although we'll miss Commissioner Smith for sure, I think there's value in that fine-tooth comb vetting of responses, to requests for information, things like that. And I would like to continue. I don't know if I'm already on the committee. I'm certainly not wise enough to chair it, but I like being on that committee and would be happy to continue.
Well, that's a good point. You were on, was anyone else on that subcommittee?
Maybe Peter, although we didn't see him as often, and
Oh,
I know Senator Przonski was on it.
yeah, yeah.
Um, But I think it was generally Lisa and I, and I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor and I and Commissioner Smith were the ones who came most of the
Okay.
time.
Well, that's helpful to know that to have your perspective on there as you served on the committee, you could probably understand the value of it. Also, I didn't think about it, but having Ms. Taylor on there actually would make sure that this the committee didn't have guardrails on it to make sure we were still well within our proper role in the system. That would make me feel more comfortable, I guess. I didn't think about that, but that's a really good point. Is anyone else interested in serving on a committee like that?
I would be interested, yeah.
Okay, Haley. All right. Tom, would you like to chair that? Did I see your hand raised, Commissioner
No,
Nava?
the thumbs up was for Commissioner Olson
Oh,
agreeing to be on there. I really don't think that I'd be well suited to chair. Practically, I think Ms. Taylor is such a leader in this area that I don't know if we need a chair the way Commissioner Mandelberg chairs the subcommittee on governance.
well,
Maybe
I
it's more
don't,
like when you were on the audit committee, you didn't chair, right?
nope.
Can we rely on Ms. Taylor to lead that committee? I don't feel like I have enough time and expertise to be a
Okay.
subcommittee chair.
Yeah, I don't think it's, sorry, Commissioner Mandelberg?
I don't think it would be I don't think it's specifically in the bylaws, but I think a subcommittee of the commission has to be chaired by somebody who's a commissioner. Um, I think it's entirely appropriate for staff to be staffing a committee. Um, but I think that the impetus for what the committee does needs to come from the commission. That would be my sense of the right way for the um, energy to flow.
May I make a suggestion? And I know Vice Chair Mandelberg sets such a high bar with her commitment to subcommittee work, but there was a time under our last executive director when it appeared that all commissioners needed to be on a subcommittee. And that's kind of how I got on the legislative subcommittee, even though I'm busy. And I wonder if there were such an expectation now, if people might just reflect on which of the ones might interest them. And then once we kind of see rosters, that might
Okay.
give us a good basis for determining who could chair. I mean, I'm really as you know, I'm pretty time constrained, working full time as I do, but I know whoever chairs it practically, I think Miss Taylor's going to be sort of the MVP of that subcommittee.
Okay. I do like that idea, is that just everyone sends me an email saying which of these committees or the audit committee, legislative review, or whatever we're going to call this, or the governance subcommittee, you would least hate to be on. And you can, rank choice voting 1, 2, and 3, right? So if you would do that, and you're not tied into any, because we probably do have more people here than we have positions, since we only have really 2 committees and then 1 just position on the audit. But if maybe everyone here, and Ken or Maura, could you send an email out to, are we missing any commissioners? I don't know if we are, but if we are, I guess the legislators, Senator Brzezinski and Rep Evans as well. But let's send them out and just ask them for that request, if that's okay.
Yes, and
That's an
we're
excellent
all
idea.
too. So
Yeah.
we'll set it out. Yeah.
That's a good idea, Tom. I really appreciate that. Okay. That's sort of like, what my wife used to tell me, don't give our children, don't ask them if they will eat this or that. Just say, which of these 2 will you eat? All right. So that's subcommittee. So next thing, we're well ahead of time, half hour ahead. Legislative update by Lisa Taylor. Lisa, are you here? There you are.
I am. Great. See me? Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. I've got a short presentation for you all. And, nope. Oh my gosh. All right, great. Well, Lisa Taylor, Government Relations Manager. So we are in the midst of the legislative session. It's the short legislative session, so things are going very quickly. I stole this image from, I believe, Rep. Lewis's newsletter, but I thought it was a good infographic of just all the deadlines that are coming up. Or have passed. As you can see, we just recently passed the February 16th deadline, which was the first chamber work session deadline. So President's Day was very busy with all the committees getting bills out of their committee, holding work sessions, because any bills that didn't leave their first chamber committee, so if it was a House Judiciary bill, it had to leave House Judiciary through a work session. They are, well, people say they're dead. They fail to move forward. These deadlines don't apply to the Rules Committee, Ways and Means Committee, and a few other very specific situations. But for the most part, policy bills that have not left their chamber of origin are no longer moving forward. The next deadline coming up is on the 20th, as you can see, very, very quickly. And that is when the second chamber needs to post the work session. So if a bill moved out, a House bill moved out of House Judiciary, it's headed to the floor, it's going to get a vote. Assuming it passes the floor, it's going to move over to the Senate, where it will be assigned to a committee. And all before the 20th or on the 20th, that Senate Judiciary needs to post a work session saying we are going to work this bill sometime before February 26th. So again, very short turnaround. These deadlines also impact the agency because we are often asked to do fiscals on these policy bills that might have a fiscal impact. Our fiscal impacts are usually done for a bill that increases a crime level, creates a new crime, and that's when there's going to be a fiscal impact to us because, for instance, a B felony going to an A felony, an attorney can do fewer A felonies. So we're going to need more attorneys to cover those cases, and we have to do a little write-up and estimate the costs that the agency will incur from that bill and send it back to LFO. And with short sessions, some of those deadlines are we're getting fiscal requests about 2 hours before the bill is going to be heard. So very tight timelines that we're turning around. This is just a review of when we have appeared or will be appearing in front of the Public Safety Subcommittee. That's the Ways and Means Subcommittee that Public Defense appears before. On the 3rd, we did our capacity report. And that capacity report was the one that was tied to the $22.1 million that had been unscheduled. They received that report. It was very well received. And so that $22.1 million will be scheduled by DAS. And I do want to make something really clear with this because I've had some conversations with folks and there was a little bit of confusion. That $22 million, that's not new money. We didn't receive $22 million because we turned in a capacity report. That $22 million was part of our budget already. And the legislature had told DAS to unschedule those funds. So at a very basic sense, DAS was holding $22 million that they weren't going to give us to use until we had turned in this capacity report. So by us submitting the capacity report and it being received by the legislature, those funds were unscheduled. But again, we expected to get those funds. It's kind of a situation where had something gone wrong and we didn't turn in that report and they did not give us that $22 million, it would be a big problem. But us turning in the report and them scheduling the $22 million just means we're at status quo. So I just want to make sure that's really clear to folks because I know it's kind of a odd situation. Then on the 5th, we appeared before Public Safety Subcommittee and presented our key performance measure report, which you heard a little bit about the process moving forward with KPMs. On the 17th, we did our application contribution program technical adjustment. The ACP is the program where there's actually a whole presentation by OJD if anyone's interested in learning more about this from the 17th. It's the basically the fund where fees go for defendants who pay a portion of their defense. And there's a whole technical process for how much they have to contribute. And that's all run by OJD. And then on the 19th, as Director Sanchagrin mentioned, we are appearing to present on the unrepresented numbers and a Roberts update, and that will be tomorrow. Also, a quick update on our Oregon Trial Division request for 6 attorneys. We presented that during the January legislative days, and it was approved or recommended to move forward. And so that request has been incorporated into House Bill 5204, which is the session budget bill. So the request for the 6 attorneys that start July 1st is currently sitting in a bill that we would expect to move forward. Those 6 attorneys starting in July are separate from any additional proposals or requests that we're making around Roberts. Finally, this is a very, very high level overview of just some of the policy bills that we're seeing this session. It's a short session, there's no money. So accordingly, the bills are a little bit, there's fewer bills than there would normally be, even for a short session. We've got House Bill 4041, which is the House Judiciary Omnibus Bill. This is probably the largest bill to do with public safety matters. There's a number of things in there. There's a reduction to driving while suspended, which moves a couple of instances that used to apply to driving while suspended, and it's moving those from misdemeanors to violations. Then there's an increase to the felony elude statute, which increases the crime level. So or the crime category. So not a difference between, misdemeanor and felony, but a difference between, level 3 and level 6, or those aren't the actual levels, but that's the crime category. There's some post-conviction relief, and there's also some sections about the sentencing process from the Department of Corrections tied to Torres Lopez. Some folks were released potentially earlier than they should have been, and whether or not DOC has the authority to recapture those folks and bring them back into DOC custody. And then finally, there was a theft amount increase, which increases the various theft amounts. So like $100 to $150 for the lowest level of theft and so on. Those numbers hadn't been increased since, I believe I heard 2009. So it was a kind of inflationary increase that hadn't happened in a while. The Senate Judiciary Omnibus 1516, I really just included this so you were aware. It mainly became an automatic license plate reader bill. There's a couple other sections in there, but that's predominantly what it was, which doesn't have a huge impact on us. House Bill 4096, which was a B felony for possession of 6 or more firearms. So right now, I believe it's a C felony for felon in possession of a firearm. This bill actually failed at the work session. Just kind of an interesting note. Senate Bill 1515, which was post-conviction relief for certain types of discredited science. I believe the 3 types were bite mark analysis, hair follicle analysis, and gun casings. And so it creates a 2-year statute for folks who were convicted using those discredited science to make a post-conviction relief claim. And we did put a fiscal on there because we believe we're going to need some more PCR attorneys for this. It might be similar to the non-unanimous juries where there's kind of a push to go find folks who fall under this category so they can get some PCR relief. House Bill 4151 had to do with swatting. It creates a C felony for swatting that causes injury or death. Again, we don't believe that is going to occur a lot, so there wasn't a large fiscal on that. And then Senate Bill 1530 is harassment, adds harassment of an elected official to aggravated harassment. Again, we work with the CJC to kind of estimate how many cases we think might happen, and very few cases are likely to fall under that category. So it's not going to increase MAC a huge amount. Are there any questions about some of these bills, or have you heard about other bills that you'd like me to kind of give an update on? Yeah, Commissioner. Sorry, I can't see others also, so please just go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Do you post the bills somewhere on the website, or are they available to commissioners to review?
Yeah, I do not post any of the bills on our website. I do at the end of sessions, I usually create a session wrap-up report that goes over some of the bills. The best way to kind of follow bills would be through the legislative website, OLIS. It's a really good system that allows you to track bills, and you can sign up for alerts about specific bills. But we don't really manage bills. I think a lot of this would probably fall under the legislative subcommittee that we've been discussing, and what that might look like, especially for a long session.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, could you send out a link to OList to all the commissioners, please?
Yeah, and I believe the legislature also has some good how-tos that I'll include as well.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Olson. I'm curious about the OJD presentation that you mentioned, the one on the application contribution program. Where exactly is that at? Do you know? Is that just like something you Google and it'll pull it up, or?
Yeah, I will send out a link to that as well. It was they gave a presentation before we brought up our technical adjustment.
Sweet. Yeah. Thank you.
Lisa, have you done any analysis, or has the agency done any analysis on the impact of resetting the property crime standards? How many would go from C misdemeanor to violation, et cetera, all the way up?
Yeah. Do you mean the changes to the theft amounts?
Yes.
Yeah. We provided some estimates in our fiscal. I don't actually, let me see. Can you still see the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I don't want to like accidentally share my whole screen or anything here, but we provided a fiscal on that. The kind of endpoint of that fiscal was that with all of the different parts of that omnibus bill, things kind of evened out. So it wasn't going to have a huge MAC increase or decrease either way.
Okay.
But let me see if I have the actual fiscal here. Our analysis. Oh yeah, we told them that it was actually indeterminate about what that theft change was going to, how that was going to impact us. No one really seems to keep a count of the amount that people are charged for theft.
Yeah.
We talked to the attorneys who work here in the office and Orient Trial Division, and then also some of our providers, and that's really just not data that anyone has. So it was indeterminate to us exactly how many would be moving either out of the misdemeanor category or maybe down from the felony category.
And does that apply to all property crimes, like property damages as well, or is it just theft cases?
It was theft cases and criminal mischief was involved.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Anything else? Any questions for Ms. Taylor? All right, thank you, Ms. Taylor. I also wanted to just note that I've been meeting with some of the legislative leadership, particularly trying to focus on some of the public safety subcommittee Ways and Means people who we have to have conversations with. And Lisa's been very helpful in introducing me and sitting there and making sure I don't say anything too stupid. But so far, I think the funny part is I think we've only met with the Republican side so far, which is fine. But eventually we'll try and get to everybody. It may have to be after the session. I don't know. Now that they're on the floor a lot, it's really hard to schedule things with them. So anyway, thank you for that. But just want to let you know that we are working on that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Ken, Executive Director Sanchigan, is there anything else that we missed or need to cover today? We obviously can't go beyond our agenda item here, but if there's anything else, let me know.
Just one item I should have mentioned in my director's report, just as an FYI for the commission, my appointment that was considered by the Senate Rules Committee on Monday was actually passed on or done on the Senate floor yesterday, and so that process has concluded. So as of March 1st, the interim tag will be removed, just as an FYI for folks.
Oh, probably a big raise, huh?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know we really do appreciate the work you've put into this, and I know when I text you on a Sunday morning, I shouldn't be doing that, but I appreciate you responding to me in a timely manner. So thank you very much.
It all comes with the territory. Happy to do it.
All right. Okay, thanks. I think that's it for today. Our next meeting is, I should have gone back to the slide. I always like to remind people when the next meeting is. Mara or Ken, do you have that handy?
March 18th.
March 18th. That's the next commission meeting. Do we have a work session before then?
March 5th is scheduled for the next work group.
All right. And we don't have a subject for that yet, right? But we will be informed.
That is correct.
All right. Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your attention and your attentiveness. And I look forward to seeing all your new committee assignments. All right. Bye.
Bye, guys.